What's going on, guys? Welcome back into the FantasyPros podcast. We are back with another episode of the Sunday Recap Show. Obviously, I'm not Dan Harris. I'm Mike Tagliere, usually sitting in the, I don't know what I want to call myself, but I'm not the host. I'm like the co-host. I don't know. I'm running off the rails already. Look what happens when they put me in charge. But they're not going to let me do this alone, guys. We're going to do the recap show, and we brought in my good old friend, Michael Moore from PFF. Michael, how's it going, dude?
Good, yeah. Obviously, I'm not Mike Tagliere. I'm Michael Moore. And I would call you an analyst, Mike. Would that be the appropriate title, fantasy analyst?
I think that's fair. And then Dan's just there to basically tell me that I'm dumb when I say things that are, when I go off the rails like that. So I'm expecting you, like Moore and I don't know if you guys know listening, but Moore and I used to actually do a show together. So him and I have experience together. So this should go very smoothly when talking about the games, going through the action, letting you know what our takeaways were from some of the big performances, some of the not so big performances, and some of the injuries that took place and going forward. But Moore, before we get into anything, we haven't recorded a podcast since this whole thing happened with Kareem Hunt and Spencer Ware. Obviously, there's a game going on as we're recording this. The Chiefs are leading right now 40-30. Spencer Ware didn't have quite the game that I think everybody expected him to, myself included. He did score a touchdown. But what's your takeaway going forward with him? Is he like a must start every week, or are you someone that's like of the mindset where you think he's more matchup related?
Well, I think any starter on that offense this season, I think is a must start. And look, it's not as if they're time sharing that position, right? I mean, he is the man. He is getting the majority of the carries. He's already up to 14 now as we're recording this, and no one else has more than 5. So yeah, for me, he's a must start. Now, is he going to be a top 5, kind of game changer? That I don't know about. But is he, at the very least, a must start? Yeah, I would say so.
Yeah, that's kind of how I feel about it. And obviously, if you guys are listening, Kareem Hunt is droppable. Some people have asked me on Twitter. I think that most people know that by now, but the NFL did hand down a 6-game suspension, and that's still pending everything else. He's on the exempt list right now, which means even if a team picks him up off waivers, which we're going to find out, the team can pick him up off waivers. We're going to find out Monday by, I think, 3 or 4 o'clock Eastern time, whether or not someone picked him up. But he's still on the exempt list, which means he can't practice with the team. He can't play in games. So he's done for this year. Like, bottom line, you can drop him in redraft leagues. So let's go back and let's talk about the week, an overview of the week. Like, Moore, what's your biggest takeaway from the week? Like, is it something like maybe that the Houston Texans are, a real contender now that they've won, 9 in a row, or that the Bears are a pretender, losing on the road to the Giants? I mean, this is the second time this year that's happened to the Bears. They lost to the Dolphins earlier on the road, and now the Giants. It seems like they're playing up or down to their competition. But what was your biggest takeaway from this week? Like, was there a big winner for you?
Well, first, Mike, don't be so hard on your Bears. Okay, you're starting Chase Daniel. I mean, you can be excused for not pulling out the win today, but I don't know. I think the biggest for me, and I know we'll probably get into those a little more, but the Packers, man, I don't know what is going on there. I mean, for me, that's the biggest takeaway. It's just really, I guess disappointing's the word, because you've got Aaron Rodgers, who's obviously, used to be a top 5 option every week. Aaron Jones even today looked like he's human at this point. So for me, that's the biggest one, is just how, I guess, average they look when they really shouldn't be.
Yeah, when you have a quarterback like Aaron Rodgers, you should always be in the playoffs. So now it is a team game, and in the NFL, you can't. It's not like the NBA where if you have Michael Jordan on your team, you're going to win every single year. It's not like that. So even though I think the world of Aaron Rodgers, it does require somewhat of a team effort, but Mike McCarthy, the coaching matters. And actually, just as we were starting to record this, Mike McCarthy was let go by the Packers. He was fired, which is really odd, to happen in season to a guy that's been tenured with this team for so long. But let's be honest, though, this guy has been carried by Brett Favre and Aaron Rodgers throughout his entire career. I mean, I did a list more this offseason, like ranking the NFL coaches. I had McCarthy as a bottom 5 coach, and people told me I was crazy, but I think he's done very little with a lot of talent. I mean, is it fair to say that you agree with that?
Oh, completely. Yeah, it's really a shame, because I feel like Aaron Rodgers' career at the end of it is going to be one of those what ifs. If he had just a better coach, would he be on the same level as Brady, at least when it comes to the championships and the winning?
Yeah, because the stats, obviously, he has those. And the game is changing to where stats are going to be looked at as completely different. Like Patrick Mahomes could be breaking some of those numbers right now.
Oh, God, yeah.
Yeah, but when looking at like the career numbers of Aaron Rodgers in terms of like touchdown to interception ratio, it's not even close between him and number 2. But, that's a story for a different day. But it's good to know that Aaron Rodgers is going to have a new coach. The question is, who is it? Is it Josh McDaniels? There's a lot of names that are going to be tossed around. I'm sure that the Browns job is going to get a lot of attention, where like there's a lot of like appealing coaching jobs out there with good quarterbacks in play. So I am curious to see who the Packers end up with. But before we get into the recaps of today's action, I do want to let you guys know about the sponsor of today's show, Leesa Mattress. You guys know that, I mean, I've talked about it in the show before. When an NFL player has a back injury, I can tell you the experience because I've had that, right? And ever since I got my Leesa mattress, legitimately, I don't wake up stiff anymore. And I can't say enough good things about the company. A quality night's sleep helps you recover from distractions faster, prevents burnouts, make better decisions, improve your memory, and overall, just make fewer mistakes. And obviously, that's what we're here to do, help you try and make fewer mistakes. It's not marketing, it's science. To design a better mattress, Leesa leveraged 30 plus years of experience and hundreds of hours of testing to develop the perfect mattress for all body shapes and sleeping styles. Leesa's mission is to provide a better night's sleep for everybody. Through their 110 program, they donate one mattress for every 10 they sell. That's more than 26,000 mattresses and counting. Leesa strives to leave the world better than they found it. But that doesn't stop with the mattress donations. Together with the Arbor Day Foundation, Leesa plants one tree for every mattress they sell and are committed to planting 1 million trees by 2025. Don't miss these winter savings. Get $160 off a Leesa mattress at leesa.com/FantasyPros. That's LEESA.com/FantasyPros. All right, more. So we're going to go back to the Thursday game just to start with that one. We're going to do a quick recap of that. What do we take away from this game? It's just like any given Thursday, you know, like the saying is any given Sunday, but any given Thursday, anybody can be beat. Is that the story here? Was it just a bad game for the Saints, or are the Cowboys a real contender?
I've been one of those that hasn't believed it for the Cowboys all season, but I think I finally am ready to believe it on that. I mean, look, their defense is good. You can't deny that anymore. Leighton Vander Esch is, in the running for Defensive Rookie of the Year. That line is healthy. They've got everyone playing at a really high level. And look, they were able to stop the best offense, at least this side of Kansas City, at least so far. So, no, I think the Saints just, ran into a really good defense. And look, it's better for them that they do this now than in the playoffs, because I think guys like Peyton, guys like Breeze will learn something from this. But I just chalk it up to a very good offense running into a very good defense.
Yeah, I'm not too worried about the Saints moving forward. To close out the fantasy season, they're going to play against the Bucs. Obviously, that's a fantastic matchup. You have the Panthers on the schedule, who have been a much better matchup than I think anybody anticipated. And then you have the Steelers to close it out in the fantasy championship. So, I mean, all three of those teams are capable of putting up points in the Saints. So those should be good games. I think the question I think everybody listening right now would want to know, if they own Traquan Smith, is he droppable, or are you of the mindset you keep him in case there's an injury to Michael Thomas, but you really don't want to play him?
I don't know that I'm in a real hurry to keep him. He's been real boomer bust this year. I mean, like we saw a couple weeks ago, he just exploded for his first 100-yard game, and then last week he had an egg. He had a 0 in the Dallas game. So I don't know. I mean, obviously, if your rosters are large enough, he's a good lottery ticket. But I think if you're relying on him for a playoff run, I would look at other options.
Yeah, because I mean, looking at the matchups coming up, they have the Bucs. There's nobody there to stop Michael Thomas. Michael Thomas should go bananas. They have the Panthers after that. Dante Jackson, James Bradbury, meh. And then the Steelers, you figure that Joe Hayden is going to be on Michael Thomas, so therefore we could see Traquan come out. I think he's a type of guy where it's like, if you're relatively thin at wide receiver and you're not confident in the guys you have there, you could probably stick him in one of those matchups and just kind of play the upside, but you have to understand what you're doing when you put him in your lineup. I don't think that he's like a guy, I never understood it. Like his ECR, I think this week was a top 36 receiver. The week before, before he was announced as out, he was like top 24. And I never understood what people were seeing this, because the targets just haven't been there for him. So knowing that the Saints offense isn't throwing the ball a whole lot, there's not much to take here, but obviously you're playing Kamara and Ingram. Those guys are always in your lineup. On the Dallas side, is there anybody else outside of Ezekiel Elliott and Amari Cooper that you'd want to own in fantasy? Do you think Michael Gallup is worth a pickup at this point? Or do you think that there's just better guys out there that give you more upside?
Yeah, I think so. Look, Dallas is never going to be an offensive juggernaut. Even when they're winning, they're not going to be an offensive juggernaut. So, no, I think Cooper, who, look, don't get me wrong, Cooper surprised me. I wasn't sure if he was going to be any good. I know you've been on the Amari Cooper train for a long time, but especially going to Dallas, I had my concerns. But look, he's proven to be a fantasy relevant player there. But outside of him and Zeke, yeah, I would pass on any other Cowboy at this point.
Yeah, definitely. I'd rather take my shot a high-scoring team, and I think the Cowboys are fine playing that slow-style offense, using their run game. Now, it should be noted that they do play the Eagles Week 14, then they're going to play the Colts and the Bucks. So their remaining schedule is promising, so Dak Prescott, definitely worth a look as a streamer if he's available in your league, but that's really all there. The Bears. I'm not going to talk about the Bears today. What do you have to take away from this? The one stat I did want to give is that next gen stats, it's really neat. Some of the stuff they do with the NFL, they have in the players' shoulder pads, they have these chips and they track everything. Tariq Cohen was targeted 14 times for a total of 118 air yards today. Okay. No other running back has had over 80 air yards in a game over the last 3 seasons. What does this mean? Like, I mean, Anthony Miller was kind of forgotten. I know he scored a touchdown at the end of the game, but he saw 2 targets. Trey Burton, 1 target. I think this was a product of Chase Daniel and who he likes in the passing game. But what was your overall take on the Bears? Are you worried? Does this mean that Trey Burton is droppable? Do you consider him as a streamer only, or is he someone that you keep plugging into lineups, once Mitch comes back?
Well, first on Burton, I think he's just streamable at this point. I don't know how you could rely on him. He's not consistent. But another thing I find interesting about Cohen, which, I mean, this kind of defeats the purpose, but did you realize he's the most targeted player on the Bears so far after this game?
I believe it. I guess Allen Robinson missed a couple games. Yeah.
He's one more than Taylor Gabriel at this point. Like you said, Miller's kind of, he comes and goes. But no, Tariq Cohen is great, man. I mean, and look, we shouldn't be surprised. You've got Matt Nagy as your head coach, who did wonders with Kareem Hunt towards the end of last year. So I believe it. I mean, the other thing I took away from this game, which is the rare good Jordan Howard game, but I'm not buying that again. I think this was a fluke for him. Right?
Yeah, well, this was one of the last weeks that I would have trusted Jordan Howard. I had him ranked as my number 24 running back this week. I felt like the Bears were going to be in a better position in this game where he probably would have got a rushing touchdown, but that was obviously vultured by Akeem Hicks in this game, where the Bears put him in, one of their defensive linemen.
Yeah, where did you have him ranked as far as your running backs this week, Mike?
Oh, he was RB 78. No, but seriously, I mean that's stuff you can't predict. Adam Shaheen steals a touchdown in this game. So the Bears offense, I've said this all along, it's going to be very hit or miss week over week. Even Allen Robinson, to a certain extent, he's the number 1 receiver. But Mitch Trubisky coming back, it should provide a more stable floor for a lot of these pass catchers, including Anthony Miller, who was starting to become like somewhat of a favorite of Mitch Trubisky. But Chase Daniel over the last couple weeks has not shown that. Whereas Trey Burton, I'm kind of with you in terms of like what he is. I think he's a streamer now, where it's just he's not someone that you want to trust on every week just because he hasn't been getting the targets. It's been like 3 targets most weeks. And now with Adam Shaheen there to steal some touchdowns, not ideal. On the Giants side of things, I don't think there's much to talk about from this. Saquon Barkley seemed to get hurt towards the end of the game, but he did return, and they're calling it a shoulder, like an AC joint sprain, but it seems like he should be okay going forward. Is there anything that you wanted to talk about on the Giants side?
No, I mean, apparently we can, project Odell Beckham throwing touchdowns. What is that, his 2nd of the year? So, you can't sleep on that. But other than that, yeah, I don't think so. I mean, it's a typical Giants game, I think. Saquon is the man there. And obviously Beckham, he's going to be a must start every week. But outside of that, I didn't see anything much different on that.
Yeah, it seemed like the Giants were awfully close to benching Eli Manning this game. They had Kyle Lauletta on the sideline with his helmet on. I believe he was going to enter in the second half if things didn't turn around. And then Odell Beckham throws a touchdown, and all is right in New York. So, yeah, I mean, even Sterling Shepard, it's just he's a very low ceiling type player at this point. So if you need to drop him for someone that has a better matchup, I'm not opposed to it just because I just don't think there's enough volume. I think they want to run the ball more often than they throw the ball, and I mean, for good reason. So moving on to one of the less attractive games of the week, we have the Bills and the Dolphins. That was
less attractive. How dare you, Mike?
I mean, we had Josh Allen as the number 1 quarterback through the first set of games. Like legit, like after the Thursday night game and the first set of games, Josh Allen rushed for 135 yards against the Dolphins. I mean, I think a lot of us expected LaShawn McCoy to get some of that yardage. McCoy finishes with 15 carries, 52 yards, a very mediocre day. But Zay Jones gets back in the good graces after, I think last week he had 1 target in that game, but he bounces back with 9 targets, 4 catches, 67 yards, and 2 touchdowns against Miami. Let's just be real here. You don't want to tie yourself to anybody on the Bills, do you?
Oh, no. Like for a playoff run? No, I'm good. I mean, look, I think if anything, if you're able to, it's good research for next year. I mean, look, like Zay Jones, for example, and see if you agree with this, was kind of in the same position Tyler Boyd was last year. He was a second rounder, didn't really do a whole lot through the first part of his career, but look, he had time to develop and really turn in a good season. I think Zay Jones is capable of that next year, but obviously a lot of things have to happen for them. But as far as this year, no, we're done. We can safely move on from that.
Well, let's pretend someone has an injury on their team and they have Zay Jones available on the waiver wire. He's playing the Jets next week, and the Jets have been destroyed by in the slot all year long. Buster Skrine has just been awful. Is Zay Jones even on that radar, or you're just you know what? I am not trusting Josh Allen in my playoff life. Even if it's just a second flex spot, I'm not doing it.
A second flex spot, I could be talked into it, but definitely nothing higher than that.
Yeah. Yeah, and moving over to the Dolphins receivers, Devontae Parker catches a touchdown, the first one of the year. Someone asked me earlier this morning, actually, they said, are we done with Parker? And I said, yeah, I'm done. I'm not trusting this offense. I'm not trusting the targets. He gets 7 targets in this game. It's actually a good performance against the Bills, who have been really stingy against wide receivers. Kenny Stills scores a touchdown as well, but again, this is another offense. Do we want to trust Ryan Tannehill, who, by the way, he did throw 3 touchdowns on just 24 pass attempts today?
Yeah, I was going to say, of all the teams, as far as giving up fantasy points to quarterbacks, the Bills were literally the best, meaning they gave up the least amount of fantasy points up to this point. So logically, you would think, okay, Tannehill's going to have a bad game, but then he goes out and throws 3 touchdowns. So I don't know, man. This whole team's a conundrum. Let's remember, it's the same team that continues to start Frank Gore out there every week when they got Kenyon Drake. So who the hell knows what they're doing? But I don't think any of them can be trusted to be consistent anyway.
Yeah, Ryan Tannehill's thrown 178 pass attempts this year. He's thrown 13 touchdowns. That's a 7.3% touchdown rate. I want to say that Aaron Rodgers has hit that number twice in his career, which is just stupid. The NFL has moved, when you look at quarterback numbers as a whole, it's everybody, if you combine all the quarterbacks for every single week, it looks like Drew Brees' numbers from a couple years ago. It's gotten quite ridiculous where these numbers, these touchdown rates are just so crazy high. Where it's if you have a quarterback with 5%, you're meh, I don't want that guy. I don't want that guy on my team.
We can do better.
Oh, but yeah, this is one of those games we don't have to talk too much about. There's not too much. The idea when you're going into fantasy playoffs, you want to play guys who are relatively consistent. I don't think we could say that about any of these guys. And you want guys that present upside if you don't have that consistency. And I don't think either of these teams present massive upside. So, yeah. Did you hear anything about Frank Gore? I want to say he left this game with an injury. I did not watch this game. This was not one of my chosen ones, so I did not.
I didn't see anything. As far as carries go, he still had 8, which was more than Kenyon Drake for some reason. But yeah, I don't know. It's now, don't get me wrong. Gore's had a good season, actually. He's averaging 4.5 yards a carry, which is nuts because he's, 50 years old. But yeah, there's just nothing. There's nothing consistent there. There's nothing to look forward to from a fantasy standpoint, I don't think.
Yeah, unfortunately, there's not. Going over to 2 more teams that, again, I'm just not really excited about these teams. And I understand that, I don't want to say that about every single team, but we're talking about the Broncos and the Bengals here. These 2 teams put up 34 points in the game today. The Denver Broncos, Case Keenum, this should have been a solid spot to be able to stream him. He throws for 151 yards and a touchdown. That's not going to get it done. When you're playing, in a league where it takes essentially 20 plus fantasy points to get inside the top 12. So Case Keenum, even in a good matchup, I don't think we could trust him. I think the one thing here is Phillip Lindsay goes bananas, and his playoff schedule is nuts. I loved Phillip Lindsay this week, and I pulled the trigger in some of my DFS lineups. I should have had him in every single one instead of Aaron Jones, but that's a story for a different day. Is Royce Freeman worth holding on to as a handcuff? Let's say that, we talked about Spencer Ware being one of the best handcuffs. Malcolm Brown is one of those guys. Is Royce Freeman a must to have on your bench? Should he be sitting on waiver wires right now?
I would pick him up. The funny thing is what gets lost in this crazy Phillip Lindsay season is Royce Freeman's actually played pretty well. He hasn't seen as many carries, as many snaps, but he's still producing pretty decent numbers too. Hell, he had a better elusive rating going into this week than Phillip Lindsay, So I would pick him up if he's available. And not just necessarily, as kind of an injury precaution. But look, they obviously still want to get him involved. He had double-digit carries today. That's the 4th time he's done that this season. So it's obvious he's not going away. But yeah, I would definitely see if I had room on your bench for him.
For sure. I think he's one of the higher upside backups because they do clearly want to run the ball. They had 34 rushing attempts today as a team. Cortland Sutton gets his first game of his NFL career with more than 3 catches. He gets 4. 4 catches, 85 yards and a touchdown. It's still, you'll take it as a fantasy owner. That's wide receiver 3 territory. But he's not someone like, as I mentioned more, this is the first game in his career he's caught more than 3 passes. Is that someone you want to rely on in the fantasy playoffs? I mean, I guess he should probably be owned, but are you excited to put Cortland Sutton in your lineup?
No, it would be very nerve-wracking if you're relying on him. And again, he's not going to be a guy that he's your wide receiver 2 by any means. But look, I tend to think as rookies progress in their initial season that they get better. You know, I think our mutual colleague Scott Barrett had some numbers on this too, but yeah, I think he's got some upside, but there's definitely going to be the potential for a 0 there too.
Here's the question for you. I think that Cortland Sutton gives a higher floor, but who would you prefer to have on your team? Let's pretend you're not starting these guys, but you could have one on your bench. Cortland Sutton or Traquan Smith? Which one?
I'd probably go Sutton.
Yeah?
Personally, yeah. I think he just is higher on the food chain in Denver than Traquan Smith is at this point.
I would agree with you there, but we haven't seen the upside that Traquan presents because he's done it in 2 games against Washington, against the Eagles. And that's what I'm saying. Like, there's been 2 massive games by Traquan, but Cortland hasn't really had that blow-up game, but I think he presents a much higher floor. I guess it just depends on what you're looking for, right?
Well, the other thing is, as you kind of alluded to, Denver's offense is obviously nowhere near the Saints' offense. So the Saints' offense can support a Traquan Smith in addition to Kamara, Michael Thomas, that stuff. With Denver, it's pretty much Phillip Lindsay and that's it at this point.
Yeah, even Emmanuel Sanders, 4 catches, 19 yards.
Right, so I think, to me, I'd still go Sutton just because I think I'd feel a little better about him being involved than Traquan at this point.
That's fair. That's definitely fair. Let me throw out another name in there. Would you rather own Curtis Samuel than both of them?
I don't know anyone that saw this coming, but good for him, man. I mean, he is on a roll. I mean, there was a couple of weeks he was scoring every week. I mean, he had like 1 catch and then, it'd be a touchdown. But this week, I think it was his best week as far as receptions and catches go, right?
He saw 11 targets today. That's a career high. Over the last 2 weeks, he's played 112 of 129 snaps.
Yeah. I mean, look, he's very good for that offense, obviously, and I'm very happy that they're able to find ways to use him, right? They're not just trying to pigeonhole him into some kind of role. And look, I don't know if Devin Funchess is going to be there next year. I mean, I think next year could be really big for Samuel, but for this year, he's starting to get into that conversation where you want him as a flex just because of the scoring potential there.
Yep, that's why I wanted to throw him out there. I think that it's very close between him and Cortland Sutton, which one I'd own. I guess it's probably still Sutton, but it's very close. I think the upside does sway to Samuel, though. On the Bengals side of the ball, this is a team that their defense is just struggling. They're allowing opponents, 72 plays per game. It's kind of ridiculous at this point. They don't know how to use Joe Mixon. They lost A.J. Green. That's the big news from this one, is that A.J. Green came back from his foot injury and re-injured himself. He was in tears as they took him off on a cart. His season's over. Like that, he's not playing again this year. I was of the mindset that he shouldn't return. This team was playing for nothing outside of Marvin Lewis's, Bengals life, which shouldn't exist in the first place. But yeah, I don't know, man. Tyler Boyd, I think he performs better with AJ Green on the field. John Ross is clearly going to walk into some targets. So I guess he's someone that we should talk about. Do you think John Ross, now that AJ Green is out, do we think that John Ross is worth owning?
No.
Fair enough. Jeff Driscoll not doing it for you, huh?
No, I mean, look, even in the few games that Green was out earlier this season, I mean, don't get me wrong, Ross scored, but he's not going to see the volume. I mean, look, this is going to be the Tyler Boyd show the rest of the way. And look, he's earned it. I mean, he's performed well both with and without A.J. Green in the lineup. So I think Tyler Boyd's about to see an even bigger target share to end the season.
Yeah, for sure. That's kind of where I'm at with it. I think CJ Uzama is someone that Jeff Driscoll likes an awful lot. He saw another 7 targets today. They're not going to be like explosive targets or anything like that, but if you're looking for a floor, he at least delivers that. So all that Matt Lacoste conversation about people with the Broncos, streaming their tight end, get out of here. All right, let's move over to the next game. We have Cleveland Browns and the Houston Texans. The Cleveland Browns come back down to life. I think we all should have seen this coming. It's not like the Browns are going to go to a playoff contender like overnight just because they got rid of Hugh Jackson. It's going to take some time, and I don't think Greg Williams is the guy to turn that franchise around. So the Browns, anybody here that's worth owning? I mean, like, obviously Baker Mayfield is streamer worthy. I don't know how you feel about him next week. They're going to be playing against Carolina, a team that has allowed multiple touchdown passes in, I think, 10 of their last 11 games. You have Antonio Callaway, who's playing a role, Jarvis Landry, a little bit more volume today. Even David Njoku, 6 targets, 3 catches, 8 yards. I mean, against Houston, it was a good matchup. It's just so hard to predict this offense week over week.
Yeah, I don't know. Look, I'm a big Baker fan, so he's still going to be a top 15 quarterback for me. He's getting to the point where you're going to want to start him. I mean, look, even this week, he threw for 400 yards, pretty much. He had a 9.2 yards per attempt, which is pretty good. And look, it's because they were behind most of the game. So, of course, he was chucking it. And, yeah, he had 3 picks. But, again, he had a touchdown in there. I'm not real worried about it. I think Nick Chubb is still going to do well. Look, the only reason he didn't have more volumes because they were down early and down big. He had 9 carries. That won't be the case every week. So, no, I think there's a lot to like here. I think, like you alluded to, Njoku, that was probably my biggest disappointment of any one player this week. Because, of the 400 yards that Mayfield threw, he had 8. Ugh, that's brutal. That's just brutal.
For sure. And I'm a Baker fan too. I still feel like he's like a quarterback of the future. You're going to be talking about him for a long time. I felt like he rushed a little bit of his throws this game, almost like he didn't want to take a sack against that Texans pass rush, and he didn't get sacked all game, but it really reflected in his stats. But it was an off game for him, and that's fine. But I'm with you in the fact that I think he'll bounce back against Carolina, and he's going to be in that high end wide receiver 2 conversation. I don't think Antonio Callaway or Rashard Higgins are guys that I want to own. And honestly, Duke Johnson, is he droppable? He saw 2 catches in a game that they were down the entire time.
I think so. I think this is the Nick Chubb show at this point. And look, I think they're okay with that. They're okay with one running back doing everything. They don't need him anymore.
But why did they sign Duke Johnson to the extension?
Well, look, they also signed Carlos Hyde, too. So, and look, for all we know, it was kind of Nick Chubb insurance, right? Because Chubb was coming off, still recovering from a pretty big injury a while ago. So they may have just thought, hey, running backs are cheap, at least relatively speaking. So let's just pad ourselves. And look, Chubb has come back. He's proven himself. They don't need those guys anymore.
Yep. Lamar Miller comes back with another good performance. 19 carries, 103 yards in the ground.
Man, I don't know what that baffles me still. I mean, good for him, but
it's nuts what he's doing. I mean, over the past 2 months, I think over the last 6 games, there's been one bad game, and it was against Denver, a team that has been shutting down opposing run games. So I can't even hold that against him. I don't know what happened, but clearly Lamar Miller is just running better.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's kind of vintage Lamar Miller, back to his days in Miami. He's averaging 5 yards a carry. He had his third 100-yard game this week, and he didn't even get 20 carries. He had 19.
Yep, Alfred Blues has been getting more work than people like actually realize.
That was going to be my other point. He had 12 carries today. I mean, it's obvious that they have kind of a 2-headed monster that they prefer, but that's okay. For a team that runs a lot of plays, both running and passing, they can afford to do that,
How about Demaryius Thomas? Is he someone that needs to be held on to in fantasy leagues, or is he someone that you're okay cutting ties with? Because even with Kiki QT out of the lineup today, he totals 3 catches for 32 yards. If he didn't have the 2 touchdowns last week against the Titans, I think people would view him a little bit differently. I don't feel like he's going to be a difference maker, but at the same time, he might be in that wide receiver 4 conversation.
I think that's about right. I mean, you asked earlier, is he droppable? Yeah, I think so. I mean, look, he hasn't had more than 5 catches, but 1 time this year, once. And with Houston, it hasn't been more than 4 catches in a game. So, I think he's entirely droppable at this point.
Yeah, and this was the first game since week 5 where Deshaun Watson threw the ball more than 25 times. And that's because, the Browns, I want to say they ran 74 plays. So obviously the Browns just allow a ton of plays to their opponents. So that's why you saw a little increased volume. But yeah, Demaryius Thomas is just he's just an unsexy wide receiver 4. He should give you a 3-4 catch floor, but it's not much more than that for a ceiling either. So he's just very boring. He's like an Isaiah Crowell of wide receivers right now. Going over to the most embarrassing, I don't even want to say most embarrassing. It might be, though. We talked about it for a second, with the whole Mike McCarthy firing, but the Packers were at home and they lost to the Arizona Cardinals, a team that was 2-9 coming in. The Packers were playing for their playoff lives. Where are we at with Aaron Rodgers? Is he just a streamer? I mean, I never thought that I would I never thought I'd say this. Legitimately, as one of his biggest fans, I never thought I'd say that Aaron Rodgers is just a streamer, but I kind of have to do it right now.
Yeah, and look, I don't know if the injury that he suffered week 1 is still kind of lingering, I mean, I hope so, just for his sake and for next year. But yeah, I mean, I think you're right. There's just a lot of options at this point that you'd probably go, you know what, I feel more comfortable with this player than Aaron Rodgers. And again, I don't know if it's the injury. I don't know if it's maybe the lack of supporting cast. around him? I don't know. What do you think?
I believe that it is the supporting cast, and I think that's what we saw back in 2016 when Jordy Nelson got hurt and he missed that year with the ACL. We saw him have a down season because I think that Aaron Rodgers relies a lot on chemistry. He's the type of player, type of quarterback that relies on timing and trust with his wide receivers. And if his wide receivers aren't going to be where they're supposed to, that's why when you watch him and Devontae Adams, that's the only guy that he's had around for years. And you watch those two, it's poetry in motion. Like legit. Like there is no way to defend some of the things that those guys do on the football field. Legit, nothing. Like before Adams even breaks in his route, Rodgers throws it to the sideline and Adams turns around, the ball's there, he snags it out of thin air, and it's just impossible to defend unless you know that play's coming. I just think this team is poorly coached. I think that they don't have a lot of trust in the wide receivers there. Valdez-Scantling has clearly fallen out of favor. He sees 7 targets today, but again, just 2 catches for 19 yards. I was someone saying that I thought he would bounce back, but it's not looking too good right now. This entire offense isn't moving well. And then, for whatever reason, Jamal Williams touched the ball 4 fewer times than Aaron Jones this week. Makes 0 sense, but that's why Mike McCarthy's fired.
I was going to say, that was his parting move, Mark McCarthy.
Yeah. What about the Cardinals? Like Larry Fitzgerald, Christian Kirk, are these guys every week plays, or are you just like to the point with Josh Rosen where you're like, I'll play matchups? Like, I don't think that Larry Fitzgerald's a must start. I think you just play the matchups.
Yeah, I think it's a matchup at this point. I mean, look, Larry Fitzgerald is not going to return to the numbers that he did in his kind of, renaissance a couple years ago. David Johnson even is a shell of himself, which is really unfortunate, But I don't know that there's any player on that team that really excites me at this point,
Yeah. No, for sure. That offensive line is decimated. They don't have many weapons. I mean, Chase Edmonds, before, like, someone's going to ask me, and I know someone's going to ask, no, he's not worth a pickup. No, I don't even think he's worth a handcuff, to be honest with you. If David Johnson can't get it done behind this offensive line with this play calling, I don't trust Chase Edmonds to do it, even if he did have 2 touchdowns today. Am I right there?
Yeah, and it's getting to the point where I don't know that I trust the coaches. I mean, you got David Johnson, who in his amazing season 2 years ago had 80 catches for the season, right? So he averaged 5 a game. He's done that once this year, which is really a travesty. I mean, how you don't involve him more in the passing game, I don't know. But it makes me not want to trust any of the Arizona coaches at this point, because it's like you obviously don't know what you have or how to use it. So why am I going to trust you on a week-to-week basis?
Let's play a game. Trent Sherfield. Do you know that name?
I do now.
I was about to say, am I making it up?
I think a lot of people are going to Google it after they hear you talk about it.
Yeah, so he's a wide receiver. He's like practice squad type talent. And he saw more targets than David Johnson today.
Yeah. I don't get it. I just don't get it. Like, Bruce Arians, please come back. Please. Like, I'm begging you.
Oh, man, David Johnson is praying. I wonder if David Johnson regrets signing that extension with them.
I don't know. I mean, look, anytime a guy can get paid, I think that's a good thing, And look, he knew that it was going to be, this year anyway, kind of a tough year drafting Rosen that high. Like they knew it was going to be kind of a transition year. So now I think the hope is that, they turn the corner next year, which at this point, I don't see a lot to be excited about, unfortunately. That's the sad thing.
Mm-hmm. Yep, that's where I'm at with it. Indianapolis Colts 0, Jaguars 6. This game was something. Andrew Luck throws the ball 52 times. They go back to the early season type Colts offense. Eric Ebron targeted 16 times. Catches 10 of them for 81 yards. Also fumbles on a rushing attempt in which he lost 9 yards on.
Of course.
Marlon Mack struggles again. It's the second time against the Jags this year he struggled. Are you surprised by the lack of production out of the Colts offense today, or should this kind of been expected because the Jaguars were never as bad as some people made them out to be?
I don't know, man. I mean, I like to think that it was a fluke for the Colts, meaning, look, they played Jacksonville about a month ago and Luck threw for 3 touchdowns, So it wasn't like this team has his number. So I don't know. I'm going to chalk it up to being a 1 week kind of thing. I mean, it did snap Andrew Luck's streak of whatever it was, I think 8 games of at least 3 touchdowns. So
second longest ever.
Yeah, but I don't know. He plays Houston next week. That's not a cakewalk either. So if he struggles again next week, then I think we have a problem. But I'm going to be optimistic and say it was just the one game.
What about Marlon Mack? Are you worried about him? Obviously, they're playing in Houston next week. Houston's been a tough matchup for running backs. Then they play the Cowboys after that. Cowboys with Van Der Esch even. And Sean Lee should be back in the lineup. How do you feel about him the next couple weeks?
I don't know. I mean, look, to be completely fair, I've never been a big Marlon Mack fan to begin with. And look, he's going to, like you said, he's got a couple tough defenses he's running into, So I don't know. I think they're going to be passing it a lot the next couple weeks. Let's just say that.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Eric Ebron should be worth a lot in your fantasy league. I think we could say that. On the Jaguars side, Cody Kessler, they ask him to just basically manage the game. He does just that, completing 18 of 24 passes, 150 yards. He doesn't turn the ball over. He fumbled the ball, but he actually recovered it, so that didn't really count. But in regards to the offense as a whole, without Leonard Fournette, it was rather ugly. The change in offensive coordinator, like firing of the offensive coordinator, didn't change anything. Do you have any big takeaways from this game? Because I don't think we need to talk about them.
No. Cody Kessler is what he is, and that's all we have to say about that.
Yep. They're going to run Leonard Fournette into the ground next week, and that's that. That's basically where we're at with it. Moving on to the Carolina Panthers, 17, Tampa Bay 24. Carolina loses their 4th straight game. Cam Newton in this game throws 4 interceptions to a Tampa Bay Buccaneers team that had intercepted 3 passes all year long. Cam Newton was pulled at the end of the game. They brought in Taylor Heineke to throw the Hail Mary because Cam Newton's surgically repaired right shoulder apparently wasn't good. And honestly, while I was watching this game, and Cam Newton, the few passes prior to that, he was struggling to get the ball 40 yards down the field. And that's something that Cam Newton typically doesn't struggle with. So I wonder if there actually is a problem here. Are you worried about Cam Newton going into the fantasy playoffs? Or are you just like, I think this is just a bad game. I think he'll bounce back?
Yeah, I think he'll be fine. I mean, look, he's been a top 5 fantasy quarterback all season. I mean, yes, he struggled this week, and don't get me wrong, I'm not belittling the injury that he had, but at the same time, it's not like it's anything new. He's been playing with this all year, and he's done very well. So I think he'll be fine. Something I noticed about this game. Jameis Winston is like quietly put together back-to-back pretty decent outings. He hasn't thrown a pick the last 2 weeks, which is like a miracle considering he threw, I think, 12 in the first 4 games he had. So yeah, it was just, it could just be kind of a momentum kind of changing game where you got Tampa, who's finally playing better, finally got some consistency, and the Panthers, whatever you want to call it, just kind of breaking down at this point.
That's the crazy part, is like Tampa is 1 game behind the Panthers.
Right.
Like what?
Which we wouldn't have thought of a month ago.
Yeah, is Dirk Cutter even going to have a job next year? I don't think he should. I mean, in terms of like what he's done with this team, I think there's a lot of talent on it. Their defense is it's a mess, but they have a lot of talent on the offensive side of the ball. As you mentioned, Jameis Winston, I think that they've harnessed him in. Like, I think that he actually has woken up to realize that he's not guaranteed anything in this league. Like, he's gotten benched, okay, for Ryan Fitzpatrick, a journeyman in the league. And like, he's had to understand now that he can't make those same mistakes. So he's not taking as many chances as he typically would. So you're not seeing the sky high, average depth of target. You're seeing him throw into wide receivers who are creating more separation, like Chris Godwin, like Adam Humphries, and it's working for him. He's still going to make mistakes at times, but he offers you some of that rushing upside. I like him. I mean, I have him as a top 8 fantasy quarterback for the rest of the season.
Yeah, I think that's about right. And why not? He's got the weapons for it. He's proven he can do it. I mean, why not?
And do the Bucs, do they shut down Deshaun Jackson? He was out for this week, and that's why we saw Chris Godwin, 6 targets, 5 catches, 101 yards, and a touchdown. You have O.J. Howard out of the offense. If it's these guys going forward, I think it's going to be very heavily concentrated on these top 3 receivers and the tight end. I think that Cameron Brate would be a top 12 tight end. Mike Evans, Godwin, and Humphries could all be top 36 receivers with how much they throw the ball in Tampa.
Yeah, and I mean, obviously, with how much they throw it, they don't run it at all. That's the funny thing. They had Peyton Barber, their leading rusher, or at least as far as attempts go, with 16. And I agree with you. I think they've got 3 or 4 guys anyway that can be fantasy relevant in this offense that are supported by that. It's no different than the Rams, who have and I'm not comparing the two and saying they're on
right
on the same level, but look, they've got the same deal where you have 3 or 4 guys that you can safely rely on each week.
Well, no, but realistically, like, this is something that we've done over the weeks. If you were to combine Jameis Winston and Ryan Fitzpatrick's passing totals, they would equal, I think, the number 2 or number 3 fantasy quarterback in football right there with Jared Goff. So it's not too far off. And knowing that they don't use the running backs in the passing game, it is very concentrated on the wide receivers and 1 tight end because there's no O.J. Howard. So I definitely like all these guys going forward. What about on the Panther side of the ball? Is Devin Funchess someone you want to rely on? Is he droppable? Me personally, I think I drop him. He was on a snap count today. I think he played 32 of 70 snaps. DJ Moore and Curtis Samuel seem to be every down players, but obviously DJ Moore has another stinker today, 4 catches, 44 yards. He gets a couple carries in there, but it's so frustrating. Is there any way that you don't play DJ Moore with what he's done over the last month?
Any Panther receiver is going to have some risk on it, because like you said, they got a couple guys there that they use that they don't necessarily evenly distribute it. So, but as far as Funchess goes, to me, I think he's getting to the point where he's droppable. I mean, look, no 100-yard games this season. His highest yardage total for any game was 77, and that was all the way in week 2. I mean, it's not trending in the right direction. And as the Panthers kind of fall more out of favor of the playoff race, they're going to be looking at their younger guys. They want to get snaps to Samuel and to DJ Moore no matter what. So, I think it's getting to that point with him.
I still think it's going to be frustrating, though. I think Funchess is going to be involved in the red zone, especially knowing that Greg Olsen, that's some injury news that I got to let you guys know about from this game as well, is that Greg Olsen suffered another foot injury, and he's out for the year. They basically announced it right after the game that he's done for the year. So Greg Olsen is droppable. Ian Thomas is going to be the new tight end there. He saw 5 targets, 5 receptions for 46 yards. He filled in for Greg Olsen earlier in the season. He wasn't too appealing then, but we're at the point with tight ends where it's like if you find a tight end that's seeing 5 or 6 targets, they're probably worth a look. But I don't know how good I feel about starting Ian Thomas, a rookie tight end who's filling in for an injured Greg Olsen. Anything else from this game that you want to talk about?
I mean, Christian McCaffrey's awesome. I don't think we need to repeat it, but
I was looking over that. So over the last 6 games, he has totaled 859 yards and 10 touchdowns. He has totaled 125 of the last 136 running back touches for the Panthers.
Yeah, I believe it. And look, count me as one of those that thought C.J. Anderson would see a lot more action in the beginning, but no, this is McCaffrey's team now, man. And look, that's good that they have someone else to rely on that offense besides Cam. Cam's carried that offense for so many years now. It's nice that they can kind of, lighten his load a little bit. Because look, if he does have a serious injury or needs time to recover, at least the offense isn't going to fall off a cliff now.
Yeah, that's the thing I'm worried about with Cam is that if his shoulder is really bad, I don't know if they're going to want him running the ball, which we've seen that before. We've seen that, Cam, and it's not good. It's not good when he can't run the ball. So you need that dual threat with him. So I'm going to be watching the practice reports this week with Cam Newton and kind of paying attention to that whole thing because hopefully his shoulder's okay for the fantasy playoffs. Going on to one of the more disappointing performances of the day, the Rams win 30-16 over the Lions, but it was like the most boring win I think I've ever seen from a Rams team. Like their offense looked flat through the majority of the day and against a Lions defense who is one of the least efficient teams in terms of their pass defense, like so bad. I don't think people realize just how bad they've been. But they hold Jared Goff to 207 yards, 1 touchdown, 1 interception. Todd Gurley almost lets down fantasy owners. He did it again where he's running with the ball, gets in the open field. It's a sure touchdown, right? He pulls the thing where, when you're showboating in Madden and you run across like the 5-yard line just to make the play longer before you run into the end zone. He did that, but then he laid down on the 2-yard line and everybody's like, what are you doing? There was more than 2 minutes left in the game. It made zero sense. Like they were up 1 touchdown, that would put them up 2 touchdowns. It would have made all the sense. I think it was a mistake on his part, and they actually rectified the situation and gave it to him the next play. He ran a 2-yard touchdown. So all is forgiven with Todd Gurley. But yeah, Robert Woods, Brandon Cooks, these guys are starting every week. We don't have to talk about those guys, but I want to talk about is Josh Reynolds. 5 targets, 2 catches, 19 yards. What do we do with him? Does he fall in that category with the Traquan Smith? Does he fall in the category with a Cortland Sutton? How do you feel about him going forward?
I personally put him a little level above those guys, only because, again, I think this is an offense that can safely support 3 receivers like that. And like you said, the whole offense today looked flat. It wasn't just him by any means. So I think on, quote, a normal Rams game, I think he'll be just fine. The funny part was he got all of his catches and yardage pretty early on. I think within the first quarter, and then after that just completely fell off. So no, I would still, honestly, at this point, take him above a Sutton, take him above a Traquan Smith. But, again, it was one game. I need to see him have another dud before I change my mind on that.
Yeah, I think he's like in that conversation of like, if you think that the Rams are going to score a lot of points, you obviously want to play him. And the question is do they score a lot of points? They're going to be at the Bears next Sunday night. Not a great matchup for wide receivers. Hasn't been this year. You have the Eagles after that. That's obviously a matchup everybody's going to attack. And then you have Week 16 at the Cardinals. Not a great matchup for perimeter wide receivers, as he'll see Patrick Peterson some of the time and Bené Ben-Wickery others. While that might be like a Robert Woods type week. So it's something to pay attention to. I don't think that he's a must play every single week or anything like that. As for Detroit, Here's my question to you. LeGarrette Blount gets 16 carries for 61 yards. Yeah, he doesn't do anything in the passing game. We know that. They're going to play against Arizona next week. Arizona has allowed more rushing touchdowns than any other team in the league. If Kerryon Johnson is out next week, do you think LeGarrette Blount is a top 24 option for you?
Yes, I do. And I think it's because that should be a game the Lions are in it, meaning they're not going to get blown out, kind of like they, not that they were blown out today, but let's face it. I mean, even when the Rams weren't playing well, it's not like anyone expected the Lions to come back on that. But against the Cardinals, I do expect them to be competitive, which I think does lend itself to Blount being a lot more involved in the running game, and for them to run it more and to run it on the goal line. So, I think he would be. I mean, again, like you said, Kerryon has to be out because that's the only way. But if he is, I would look for that.
Yep. All right. So Kenny Golladay just 3 catches for 50 yards. He does see 8 targets. So it wasn't a great matchup with Aqib Talib back on the field. That's where that defense, I think, gets better with Talib, because I think that Marcus Peters is not made to be a shadow cornerback. Question is Bruce Ellington. He sees 10 targets, 7 catches for 35 yards. He's essentially another Theo Riddick, right? Just playing wide receiver. Do you think that he's worth playing? Like, let's say someone's in a PPR format. They're looking for that flex player. They're like, I just want someone to pick up off the waiver wire that's going to give me a high floor. Against Arizona, that slot has been abused. Buda Baker is not a slot cornerback. He's a safety, but they have him playing slot cornerback. Do you think Bruce Ellington is worth a pickup in PPR formats for someone that might be just looking like, hey, get me 8 to 10 PPR points and I'm fine?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, look, not only is he another kind of Theo Riddick, I mean, he is their second receiver at this point. They lost Marvin Jones. They traded Golden Tate. There's no one left. It's Kenny Golladay, and that's it. So, and right now, Ellington's the guy right behind him. So, yeah, I think if he's still out there, I would definitely grab him, because I think he's definitely got a decent floor going forward.
Well, yeah, he's only been with the team for 3 weeks, like legit only 3 weeks. Like, he joined the team and he had to play that week.
And he has 6 catches, 7 catches.
26 targets, 19 receptions. Like, the yardage isn't great, but if you're in a PPR format, he's definitely worth. Standard, no. I think standard, leave him on the waiver wire, let someone else deal with it. But as for PPR formats, I definitely think he's on the wide receiver 4 radar next week, and someone that you could play if you're in trouble. I definitely like him there. Matthew Stafford, droppable, right? Like, you don't have to worry about. Is he even a streamer at this point in time?
Streamer, I think so, but I mean, it would be. He's no different than most of the other quarterbacks out there now. He's nothing special.
Right. And Levine Toilolo, no, we're not talking about him.
No. Look, the Lions need to figure out who their tight end is, because it's extremely frustrating for everyone else. The targets are just sitting there. There's plenty of targets, but they keep rotating around. They got Luke Wilson. They got Michael Roberts. They've got Toilolo this week. I mean, just pick one. Just pick one.
It's not fun. It's not fun. And to know that Eric Ebron didn't succeed in that offense and then goes to Indianapolis and starts doing the things he does, maybe he just was underutilized in the offense. Maybe that's the thing, because Luke Wilson on a per target basis in Seattle was pretty good. I figured he'd be more involved in this offense. But moving over to the Baltimore Ravens, head into Atlanta. Atlanta's obviously a team that's eliminated from contention. The game means nothing to them outside of their pride. But Lamar Jackson walks in as the starter, and they're now 3-0 under Lamar Jackson. Even if he's not completing passes, they're getting it done on the ground, and teams they don't have an answer yet. They haven't seen it enough, whatever the case is, but it's working. Is Lamar Jackson the starter in Week 14?
Yes. I can't say that fast enough.
I would tend to agree.
If you, for those that have been playing fantasy a long time, if you go back to Michael Vick's heyday, and look, he had 2 of them. He had a heyday in Philadelphia, heyday in Atlanta. When he was extremely good at fantasy and a good fantasy quarterback and his teams were winning, it's when he was rushing the ball 10 or more times a game. And that's what's happening here. And look, it's working. I mean, like you said, they're 3-0. Lamar is a viable fantasy quarterback because of the run game. So as long as they keep, I think, letting Lamar do his thing, I think that's a good situation to be in.
I would agree. I think he's going to continue to be on the streaming radar, and he's someone that I would have no issue streaming. If you needed a quarterback, if you were like, you're struggling, your quarterback's playing against, like, let's say they're playing against Baltimore, like Matt Ryan did this week. I didn't like Matt Ryan against Baltimore. You could look at someone like Lamar Jackson. Unfortunately, I feel like Michael Crabtree and John Brown are droppable. Would you agree?
Yeah, they weren't seeing a lot of volume to begin with, but if the team's going to truly shift to this kind of run first mentality, which is good for them. I mean, in real life, it's working for them. then yeah, there's not a receiver to be had on that team.
Yeah, that's where I'm at. And I actually told Bobby, like, it was like, I don't know, like 4 weeks ago that I said I'd cut Crabtree, and he's like, what? He's like 19th in the league in targets. I'm like, I don't care. He's not good. Like, and this offense just doesn't work. They don't throw very many touchdowns, and he's a very touchdown reliant receiver. John Brown, just 4 targets today, doesn't catch a single one of them. Him and Lamar Jackson are clearly not on the same page. Whereas Gus Edwards, now here's one more question I have for you before we move on to Atlanta. Gus Edwards carries the ball 21 times, 82 yards, doesn't get a touchdown this week. He does nothing in the passing game. Are you interested in having Kenneth Dixon on your bench?
Me personally, no. But I should say I have never been a Kenneth Dixon fan. I've never trusted him. I mean, he's always injured. He never plays. I can't do it. I mean, I don't know. What do you think? Am I wrong in that assessment?
I feel like he's good. I like Kenneth Dixon in terms of what he brings to the table. I don't know if he's a good fit for Lamar Jackson in their center because they want that downhill runner. Now, Dixon can be that guy. Like, he's a guy that can break a lot of tackles. Like, he's always been that guy. I want to say in PFF's elusive ratings, like when he's on the field, he's been a tackle like breaking machine in terms of what he does. So I think Dixon is worthy of a handcuff because if something happened to Gus Edwards, who by the way did have an ankle injury, he did miss practice a day last week. So it's definitely something. I think that Kenneth Dixon is one of those high upside guys on your bench because if something happens to Edwards, they don't have anybody else that is worthy of handing the ball 15 times per game. Like Ty Montgomery's not going to do it. Buck Allen has clearly fallen out of favor. That's why they traded for Ty Montgomery. So I think Kenneth Dixon is worth to just put him on your bench. You don't have to play him, but just in case something were to happen to Gus Edwards.
Yeah, I suppose. I'm not doing it.
You're just not excited about it.
You can have it.
Unfortunately, the leagues that you and I are in together are Dynasty, and he's not available, so I will not have him. But and the Falcons side of things, Tevin Coleman, 6 carries, 8 yards. I was so let down by this, and here's the thing. This morning, I was going through my rankings, doing all my updates, and I had Tevin Coleman as the RB31, and I was like, this can't be right, can it? Like, I'm gonna put Derrick Henry over Tevin Coleman. Like, really? I think
it worked.
No, I think I even had Frank Gore over him, and I know that worked too. But is Tevin Coleman no longer? I mean, I don't want to tell people to drop him. I'm not going to do that. But is he a guy that you should still rely on week over week, or is it just like, is he kind of just like someone that you have to kind of play the matchups?
Yeah, I don't know what the deal with that was. I mean, was he injured? Because Ito Smith literally had more carries than him this week.
He ran better than Tevin Coleman. As far as I know, Tevin Coleman was not hurt. He hasn't looked good. He actually, even last week, I think he had 8 carries for 6 yards or something like that. So the last 2 weeks, he's been terrible. I actually think the last 4 weeks, ever since Washington, when he had that massive game, he has basically sucked. They are going to play at the Packers next week. Then they're going to be at home against the Cardinals, and then on the road against Carolina. So, I mean, against the Packers and the Cardinals, I think he's definitely going to be playable, but it's frustrating.
Well, I think looking at his stat line this year, it's a volume thing. You know, I mean, he hasn't had double-digit carries in a month, you know, and the most carries he's had in any game this season was 16, and that's with Freeman out most of the time. You know, I mean, look, remember when Freeman was dominating a couple years ago? He was the workhorse. You know, he was getting the carries, he was getting a lot of catches, and that's just not happening here. I think a lot of people assume that Coleman would just slide right into that, but it's not happening. I mean, he's still catching a few balls every game, but as far as the rushes go, they're just not relying on him in the run game nearly as much. And look, it wouldn't surprise me if Ito Smith started eating into that more next week.
Yeah, to kind of see what they have. I mean, I don't know if they use up Tevin Coleman, knowing that he's going to be heading into free agency. I'm sure all this stuff is hurting his free agency value because he's not getting it done, but that offensive line has had a few injuries. Moving on to the Chiefs and the Raiders. The Chiefs eke out a win here. It was a lot closer game than I think they wanted it to be. 40-33, 73 points in this game. The Chiefs just continue to allow massive points. But Patrick Mahomes throws another 4 touchdowns. I don't think anybody's shocked. He runs for 52 yards. Spencer Ware, we talked about him at the top of the show. Don't know if we need to go any further on that. We talked about him a little bit there. Damian Williams, he gets 5 carries for 38 yards. He's mixed in on passing downs. He catches 2 balls for 7 yards. Do you think he's worth owning, or do you think this is more of like a kind of like a Duke Johnson situation where you don't expect him to get a whole lot of work?
You know, I might, again, if you've got the roster limit for it, I might look at picking him up and just seeing, because like if Spencer Ware doesn't prove himself, if you will, the next couple games, it's not beyond Andy Reid to make a change on that, you know. And I believe Damian Williams they brought in this offseason, you know, so they obviously like him. So, no, he would be a guy I would look at. quite honestly. Because look, like I said before, whoever the starter is on this offense at any position is going to be fantasy relevant, period.
Including Chris Conley, who, by the way, started for Sammy Watkins. He saw 7 targets. He only catches 3 of them for 25 yards and a touchdown. I think that he is in that conversation. Would you rather own Chris Conley or Josh Reynolds right now?
Is this assuming Sammy Watkins is that?
I'm assuming that Sammy Watkins is not going to play for a long time. I mean, I even if Sammy Watkins plays, I don't think he's very effective. So I happen to think that Chris Conley is going to have a big role in this team going forward.
Yeah, in that case, I might go Conley then. You know, I think it's not that there's a shortage of targets to go around in Kansas City, but I probably would trust Conley sort of standing in the food chain over Reynolds at this point.
Yeah, that's kind of where I'm at with it. And Conley's still going to have a role even if Watkins does come back because Conley was playing a slot-heavy role. So I do think he's going to be involved. Tyreek Hill, very disappointing day. 6 targets, 1 catch for 13 yards. I talked about on the DFS show this past week that the Oakland Raiders, crazy as it sounds, I'm going to share it with you just because I need to share the stat, that the Raiders still have yet to allow a wide receiver more than 91 yards this year. They have yet to allow a top 10 wide receiver performance. That still holds true. They have allowed just 1 receiver to top 17 PPR points against them. So for whatever reason, I know teams haven't had to throw a whole bunch against Oakland, but these stats are starting to look kind of ridiculous. And seeing Tyreek Hill, 1 catch for 13 yards, 2 carries for 37 yards. Obviously, the Raiders are not a team that you must attack like some people would lead you to believe.
Who knows with the Raiders, man? They're all over the place. You've got Gruden.
They suck against tight ends. I know that.
Well, that, and he's throwing challenge flags within the last 2 minutes of a scoring play. Like, it's just, you just don't know. I mean, from week to week, you don't. I mean, there's nothing reliable there. And look, you've got a lot of injuries there too now. You know, I mean, guys are going down. So, I don't know. I mean, that's a very interesting stat you brought up. But at the same time, I still think they're a defense to pick on, though, long term.
Yeah, I agree that they are a defense to pick on, usually with run games. That's why I like Spencer Ware so much this week. But Doug Martin gets it done. I mean, Derek Carr has a good game. Like, Derek Carr is known to do this. Derek Carr does this from time to time. He has a good game, and then he goes back to being the Derek Carr that, you know, he's going to throw for 120 yards. But 29 of 38 passing for 285, 3 touchdowns. Doug Martin gets 18 carries, 61 yards, and a touchdown on the ground. Not very heavily involved in the passing game. Jared Cook, 100 yards and a touchdown. Jordy Nelson catches 10 passes for 97 yards. What?
It's vintage.
Do you want to add it? Do you want to add Jordy Nelson or Marcel Aitman?
No. Now, I would look at who the Chiefs play the rest of the way because, look, it's obvious that they've got kind of a bend, don't break defense, you know, and look, their offense can bail them out most any game anyway, you know, so they allow a lot of yardage and a lot of things underneath. So, but as far as the Raiders go, no, I'm good. I mean, Jared Cook is the only, to me, viable fantasy guy on there. I mean, maybe Jalen Richard, if you're in a PPR league, you need like a desperation flex play, but outside of that, no, I'll pass.
Is it possible that the Chiefs players are going to disappoint in the fantasy playoffs? Because, I mean, listen to this. They're playing against the Ravens this coming week, then the Chargers, and then at Seattle.
You know, it's one of those things that, I mean, you're kind of stuck with them no matter what, right? Which, look, they brought you here. You're going to start them. So, and look, they did well against a Rams defense, obviously very well against a Rams defense that is not a pushover. So, no, I would have full confidence that they'll come through.
There we go. Titans 26, Jets 22. I don't have much takeaways from this game. It seems like Sam Darnold's going to be back next week for the Jets. Josh McCown, very mediocre. Nothing much here. Isaiah Crowell gets 98 yards on the ground, which might, you know, get some people like excited, but not me. On the Tennessee side, more of the same. Marcus Mariota, very inconsistent. Deion Lewis has kind of fallen out of favor to Derrick Henry. Derrick Henry scores another touchdown, but it's still it's a timeshare. I don't think I want to attach myself to many of these players at all.
No, there's just not the volume there. You know, as certainly on the Tennessee side, which is more disappointing because I think we all had high hopes for Corey Davis, Deion Lewis, etc. But they're just not scoring as much as I think we want them to, or at least for them to be reliable starters in the fantasy playoffs.
Yeah, their run game just hasn't been as successful as I thought they were going to be. Like, their offensive line seemed like they were in, you know, there was a lot of continuity, a lot of the same players returning, a team that did well, but, you know, whatever it is, the new offense, they just haven't been able to gel together and they haven't looked good. So not being able to run the ball consistently is going to bleed into the pass game, and Marcus Mariota very inconsistent. That's the best way I could describe him. I feel like all players on that team are streamers. Corey Davis could be considered like a wide receiver 3, I guess, every single week that you kind of put in there because you'll deal with the lows to get some of the highs that he gives you. But it's just not, these are not exciting teams to own any part of. I mean, same thing goes for this next 2 teams we're going to talk about. And well, I guess one of them. And one of them is your team. So the Seahawks beat the 49ers 43-16. Nick Mullins, he throws for 414 yards here, 2 touchdowns.
Yeah, he does.
Interception at the end, but it wasn't a pretty game. This was a lot of garbage time production. Do you think that he keeps the job going into next week?
I don't know. I honestly don't have a read on it just because neither him or CJ Beathard are exactly prospects. You know, I mean, I think they're just filler at this point. So to me, the guy to watch on that offense going forward is probably Dante Pettis. He had a big game this week. And if Garcon and Goodwin continue to be out like they have been the last couple of weeks, like he's proven that he can be the top receiver on that team and produce.
For sure. And there were some people that had some high hopes for him. They're going against the Broncos next week, who will be without Chris Harris Jr., who suffered a broken fibula. He's out for the year. That's going to upgrade that matchup. They were already somewhat of a plus matchup. They play the Seahawks again in week 15 and then the Bears in week 16. So, I mean, you might want to use him next week if Marquise Goodwin is out and Pierre Garçon are out. But after that, it's a little tough. One player that we're going to hear a lot about is Jeff Wilson. Jeff Wilson, all of a sudden, it's the Shanahanigans. Here we go again. It was his dad. Now it's Kyle. What's happening here? Like Matt Breida, 5 carries for 6 yards. And then Jeff Wilson, 15 carries for 61 yards. He also sees 9 targets in the passing game, leads the team, 8 catches, 73 yards. Do you know much about Jeff Wilson?
To be perfectly honest, what's funny is one of the guys we know at PFF on his projections, Scott Spratt, didn't even have him like in his database before last week. Like he literally asked me who it was. So, but look, as you alluded to, this is kind of a function of any running back in a Shanahan offense. I mean, Breida, quite honestly, probably shouldn't have even played in this game. I mean, I think he re-aggravated that ankle injury in the warm-ups. So, yeah, you know, I'm not gonna put a lot of stock in Wilson just yet. I'm gonna wait to see that Breida's healthy for them to make a decision on that. So
it could be a Raheem Mostert type thing.
Yeah. Oh, completely. Yeah. I don't think Wilson is going to be taking that job anytime soon.
Good insight.
Short of an injury.
Russell Wilson throws the ball 17 times, completes 11 passes. 4 of them are for touchdowns. 185 yards. It's very typical, right?
Super efficient. That's what he does, you know. And I will say it's encouraging even not having Doug Baldwin kind of be the Doug Baldwin of the past, you know, that he can kind of spread the ball around, whether it's Jaron Brown, Tyler Lockett. David Moore didn't do anything, which I was kind of disappointed on. But no, other than that, I think it's another ho-hum game from Seattle.
Lockett catches 1 pass for 52 yards. It's a touchdown. So it's, I mean, obviously the stat sheet looks good. And Tyler Lockett just continues to do it. I think he's caught a touchdown pass every 6 targets now this year, which is just stupid. What about the running game? Chris Carson, 13 carries, 69 yards. Rashad Penny, 7 carries, 65 yards and a touchdown. Penny, they've said, you know, as the year's gone on, they said they wanted to give him more of a look. Do you think that he's the running back to own going forward, or do you think it's still going to be this timeshare where Chris Carson is the one seeing the majority of work?
Yeah, I think Carson is probably going to see a majority. He did leave this game, though, with an injury. I mean, it was a finger injury. It wasn't a lower body injury, so not quite as serious. But assuming both are healthy, I would still prefer Carson. And look, let's remember, they were playing a 49er defense, which has not been great, and is going to be even worse now with Reuben Foster not there anymore. So I wouldn't look too much into the numbers just, you know, on the stat sheet. But look, it's still going to be a decent running game going forward. And I think both will be pretty viable.
We have breaking news at the end of our podcast here. The Chiefs are bringing in free agent C.J. Anderson and Charkandrick West for visits on Monday. They're saying that if C.J. Anderson looks well and is healthy, they are expected to sign him. That's not good.
Well, it's not good for Spencer Ware owners.
No, it's not. No, it's not. And I don't know if this is is it saying something from his performance today? I mean, it wasn't a great performance, but I mean, on a 14 carry sample size, that's a little worrisome though. It's definitely something to pay attention to. We'll be talking about it, I am sure, on the Waiver Wire show tomorrow. But man, that's not good at all. Let's hit the last game. The last game, it was really kind of anticlimactic. The Patriots win 24-10 over the Vikings, who, I mean, just couldn't seem to get anything going offensively. Kirk Cousins was continually under pressure, and the Patriots just dinked and dunked their way to a win here. I mean, the thing is the weird part is what we noticed with Rex Burkhead back in the fold, that Josh Gordon was not on the field as much as he's been. You see him get 3 targets. He catches all 3 for 58 yards and a touchdown, so he's very efficient with those targets. But the addition of Rex Burkhead to this offense, man, it just seems to have changed the dynamic. And then we get James Devlin coming in, stealing 2 touchdowns, 2 rushing touchdowns in this game. Sony Michel, James White, Rex Burkhead, all these guys, Cordell Patterson, for all these guys who could run the ball in, and they use James Devlin twice.
Yeah, when you think they're going to zig, they zag. That's what they do, But I think for me, more disappointing for on the other side, Dalvin Cook had a very good game, but had just 9 carries. I mean, he averaged 9 yards a carry this game. So why they didn't exploit that more, I don't really know. But, as far as the passing game goes, everything was down there. I mean, even Thielen, who still scored, so it kind of salvaged his day, but he only had 5 for 28. It was disappointing, I'd say, all the way around.
I would say this Minnesota team, the offense all around is disappointing. I mean, I know they brought in Kirk Cousins and everybody was psyched about it, but this team has gotten worse. 6-5-1, they're not guaranteed a playoff spot right now.
No, and if you thought Aaron Rodgers, whatever it was, 4.7 yards per attempt was bad, Cousins was 4.6. He had 44 attempts and 201 yards.
Well, Cousins and Brady have been 2 of the most overrated quarterbacks in fantasy football this year. People continually say that they're QB1s. Both of them are outside the top 15 in fantasy points per game.
Yeah, I could see that. Now, I am a believer in the the thinking about the Patriots sort of getting stronger as the year goes on. So I really think Brady will turn it on. Now, as for Cousins, I don't know. I think you may be onto something there.
Yeah, but Brady, that traditionally he's been terrible in the fantasy playoffs. It's usually when they rely on the run, and that's why it's like we saw Deion Lewis last year. I happen to think Sony Michel is going to be fine. I think Rex Burkhead is going to be like a flex type option. James White is still going to be valuable. But Josh Gordon, that's something I'm going to look at because the snaps seem to be going down. I don't have the official snap counts or anything like that, but it seemed like he was coming off the field a lot more often than he was in weeks past with Rex Burkhead back. So I'm curious to take a look at this game again. But yeah, not too much takeaways here. I mean, Stephon Diggs played through his injury. He had 5 targets. He caught all 5 of them for 49 yards in a tough matchup against Stephon Gilmore. But Diggs, I was shocked to see him play, considering they said he woke up with swelling in his knee and that he was questionable. So I don't know, this team just not clicking offensively, especially against a Patriots team that's been kind of hit or miss all year. So, man, that was a full slate of games. We only got 2 games left. Obviously, the Steelers and the Chargers will be playing tonight, and then we'll have Washington and Philly playing tomorrow night. But man, this was fun. It was fun getting back together with you. It's been a while since we recorded one of these recap shows, so hopefully you had fun. Hopefully you guys learned something more. Anything you want to say before we get out of here?
No. Good luck to everyone in the fantasy playoffs that start next week.
Yes, sir. All right. So if you want to follow more on Twitter, all you have to do is go to @PFF_more. You can follow me on Twitter @MikeTagliere NFL and check out our friends over at Leesa.com/FantasyPros. I am Mike Tagliere, speaking on behalf of myself and Michael Moore. Until next time, lights out.
I just wanted you to watch me dissolve.